was wrong. Satan had put an idea in their midst. They were a small group. Satan had put an idea in their midst. And because of the fact that they didn't have any exposure to other opinions and other advice, then the idea became accepted amongst them, promoted, and it led them ultimately to Mecca, occupation of the Kaaba, and killing Muslims. There is a lesson in it for us. The lesson is that as Muslims, no matter how sincere we may be, the organizations which appear amongst us, if they become closed, then they have the potential of harming Muslims ultimately in the name of Islam. If we organize ourselves, and to do things we need to organize. If we organize ourselves, that organization should not take on a life of its own. So that when we make da'wah, when we speak to people, we do not invite them to our organization, we invite them to Islam. We invite them to the Quran and the Sunnah. We don't invite them to the organization. And these organizations, which have spread amongst us, unfortunately, most of them call to themselves. Their way is the only way. The end result, for example, of the Ikhwan Muslimin or Ikhwan Muslimun organization was Jama'atul Jihad, Takfir al-Hijrah. These are groups which splintered off from Ikhwan Muslimin, which ended up calling to declaring the apostasy of Muslims in general, making the blood of Muslims halal. This is the danger of such organizations. So when we look into the future, how it is that we will be able to deal with the attacks which will be increasing on the Muslim world in the coming millennium, and we have to do so in an organized fashion. We have to do so at the same time with a sense of openness, that we will be able to take advice from other Muslims who may see errors in our methodology or errors in our concepts, so that we may be corrected. And remember that our da'wah, our invitation is always to Islam and not to our organization. Now with regards to the Mahdi, because that is part of our future, there are hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari in which Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman, he asked the Prophet ﷺ about what was to come. And the Prophet ﷺ replied saying, prophethood will remain with you for as long as Allah wills it to remain. Then Allah will raise it up whenever He wills to raise it up. Afterwards there will be caliphate that follows the guidance of prophethood, remaining with you for as long as Allah wills it to remain. Then He will raise it up whenever He wills to raise it. Afterwards there will be a reign of violently oppressive rule, and it will remain with you for as long as Allah wills it to remain. Then there will be a reign of tyrannical rule, and it will remain for as long as Allah wills it to remain. Then Allah will raise it up whenever He wills to raise it up. Then there will be caliphate that follows the guidance of prophethood. And Hudhayfa said, then the Prophet stopped speaking, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he identified the periods of the future with regards to the Muslim Ummah and what changes would take place. He first identified the period of himself, that is the reign of prophethood. Then the caliphate which is according to the guidance which we know as the righteous caliphate, the four righteous caliphs, and included along with that is Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And then after that, he spoke of a reign which would be unjust. That is the period of the Umayyads and the Abbasids, the Mamluks and the Ottoman state. This is the caliphate, but caliphate with distortion in it, some oppression and injustice. And then there would be the period of tyrannical rule. The period of tyrannical rule, which is after the period of the Ottomans, is the period when the Muslim world was completely colonized, and the period which follows that, the period of neo-colonization, where Muslims now govern themselves in many of the countries, but they continue to govern themselves according to the laws and the systems that were left by the colonial masters. Then there would be a return to the caliphate, which rules according to the guidance of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. That period refers to the period of the Mahdi, who would come. As Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, Al-Mahdi is from my family, a descendant of Fatima. And he said further, even if one day remain in this life, then Allah would lengthen that day until a man from among my family is raised up. His name will be like my name, and his father's name will be like my father's name. And he will fill the earth with justice and fairness as it was filled with injustice and iniquity. He further said, in description of the Mahdi, that he will come from my lineage. His forehead will be broad, his nose will be long and thin, and he will fill the earth with justice and equity as it was filled with injustice and inequity, and he will rule for 7 years. This is part of the future to come. He will be involved in leading the Muslims in a struggle against the what was identified then as Rome, which represents Western civilization. And toward the end of those struggles, the word that Al-Masih ad-Dajjal had appeared would come. And at that time, Isa ibn Maryam would descend, and the time for prayer will come, and Al-Mahdi will lead the prayer. They will ask Prophet Isa to lead, alayhi salam, but he will refuse, and instead the Mahdi will lead. And following that, Dajjal will come in contact with Isa alayhi salam, leading the armies of Muslims. He will be killed, and Prophet Isa alayhi salam will rule the earth. He will marry, he will have children, and he will die on the earth. And following that, the major signs of the last hour will come one after another. That is what Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has told us of the future. However, as was mentioned in the very beginning of the fundraising,